I woke up to the sound of banging on the door. It's already been 1 month since my agreement to be Cinder's servant had begun. I slowly pulled myself to a sitting position as the banging continued. I looked at my plain, ragged pants. They weren't going to give me any sort of clothing identity, giving the impression that I'm still a prisoner. I looked at the mirror. Without my shirt, I could tell that my body was beginning to recover visually. My muscles still hadn't returned to the definition, but I didn't look like a skeleton either. The door continued to bang, the lifeless, grim guards mindlessly banging the door. I growled, annoyed. Ugh. I'm up, you empty carcasses. I called back to them, and almost immediately they stopped. I shook my head and began doing my morning exercises. Nothing strenuous. My body was still recovering from the near starvation that I had endured. My old teammate, dead. All of my now deceased team came from the same village. I'm the last of my village. I growled, my aura flaring as I started doing pull-ups. Atlas, Ironwood, all of them. Killed them all. Left me alone. Forced me to choose this life. It honestly pissed me off just thinking that not too long ago we were in our rooms, training, sparring, laughing, and now I'm here training to be whatever the definition of evil that they want me to. Because I have nowhere else to go. Ironwood hunting me down, getting caught in a fight against Grimm, betrayed, the door opened, cutting through my train of thought. I dropped down from the bar and looked at my new owner, Cinder Fall.
Take a shower and come out. You have an important day.
I took off my pants and stepped into the shower. For Olivia, my former mate, the shower would have been torture. Ice-cold water spat out and instantly made my entire body tense. I closed my eyes and forced my breathing to regulate my body heat. While I cleaned myself, I began thinking about all that I will be doing. It wouldn't be sparring. I have been doing that since agreeing to this contract, killing Grimm to get my skills back to par. Could it be my first mission? Surely not. I wasn't near physically ready to actually go and do tasks yet that would fit my skill set. I ran a hand down my tail, making sure it was clean. Could it be that they were going to kill me anyways? I immediately shook my head. Cinder didn't seem the one to go through this much trouble just to kill me. If I was designated to die, they would have killed me in my cell. I thought through any other possibilities, but again was cut off by more banging. Never a moment of quiet during the day hours. I got out and dried off, putting on a different set of the same clothes, and banged on the door back, signaling that I was ready to leave. The door swung open. I saw my owner waiting for me, her eyes glowing in annoyance.
Be faster next time.
Knowing my position in this conversation today, I nodded again, maintaining silence. I will let her decide when I am able to speak. I bowed and she just turned.
Follow.
She commanded as she walked away. I walked behind her, leaving at least 4 paces between us to avoid any unnecessary collisions. The walk was quiet, the air so tense that it was almost suffocating. I fought the temptation to speak, fearing that the response would be much more heated than I would expect.
Today we have an audience with our queen.
Her tone held a silent warning behind it. A warning I had already applied, but Lady Cinder probably thought that a reminder wouldn't hurt. I just kept following, my eyes forward as I mentally prepared myself for what I would be introduced to. I had only heard of Salem through tales, none of them being a first-hand witness to the evil queen. I reminded myself not to feel fear. Best case scenario, I survive. The worst case? The same worst case scenario since my capture. Death. Huge darkened doors opened before us. As I walked in, I was met with a large meeting room. A long table in the center of the room, a grand hall with many windows on the walls. I peered outside the window and saw my first sight of the outside world in what felt like months. I was hoping for sunshine, trees, sights I so longed for from my home. I was met with a blackened landscape. Grimm roamed in the tens of thousands at least. The area was dead. No true life was left on the outside. I put my head against the glass and closed my eyes. The small part of me that held out for hope for some salvation evaporated. Even if I were to be let out of here, I would still be in a naturally formed prison cell. No hiding and living off the land like I had been trained to do back home. There was only what seemed like poison and death outside of these walls. After my moment, I walked back over to Cinder, who was just watching me.
Even if you could possibly escape, I'm sure you see now how far it would get you.
She was looking at the chair-surrounded table. The table looked almost unnatural, with its subtle purple glow. Lines glowed that resembled veins. On a more focused inspection, the table seemed to be a system of fused-together rocks and crystals. The chair seemed to be made out of wood and stone, and the seat at the head of the table was most noticeable. It was simple to observe that this was where Salem sat. I noticed that the room was lit with candles set upon more crystals. Throughout the room, it looked almost comical, seeing how stereotypically evil it seemed. Though I quickly figured out that any form of mockery would end my quick demise.
Kneel.
Cinder commanded. I took no moment to think as I knelt down on my left knee. I kept my head down and waited to be told otherwise. I felt a cold wind go through the room. A presence had appeared with a power that brought near tangible pressure upon my body. I felt as if something had gripped my chest. It made me fearful and anxious. I could feel in my soul that this was my former enemy.
Both of you may rise,
A voice said. It was stated so passively that I could have mistaken it for almost motherly. There was a tone underneath, a tone of superiority. I slowly raised my head and saw the mother of Grimm, the evil queen, Salem. I stood up slowly. She was much taller than I was, her skin pale as a corpse, black veins crisscrossing her body, her hair white as snow. Her eyes had no white, but was dark as twin abyss piercing red irises looking at me. She was cloaked in black. I could see no skin other than her face. My training to be a chieftain in my village taught me that this was a formal gathering, and I should treat it as such.
Now, child, who is this that you bring before me?
Before Cinder could answer, she looked at me and had a small smile. The smile of a devil. Inviting, but was going to drag you to your deepest, eternal demise.
On second thought, I want you to introduce yourself. You may be a servant to Cinder, but you still have a voice, yes?
She said to me, again almost having an understanding and comforting tone to it. I looked at Cinder, who gave a single nod towards me. I am Rowan Reignier, ma'am. I was nervous. Her aura, or whatever it was, felt like it consumed the room. She began walking towards me. Well, walking would be a mistake. Hovered towards me would be more accurate. The closer it got, the more pressure I felt, like a giant boulder was on my head and just getting larger and larger.
What is wrong, Rowan?
She asked with an almost bemused tone. She gently raised my face to look at hers, those demonic eyes examining me as if able to read into my very soul.
Are you afraid of me?
She looked at me as if she expected an answer, and I very pathetically nodded my head.
Do you fear what I will do to you?
Honestly, since she entered the room, the consequences of anything never crossed my mind. So I shook my head. It was the truth.
I see. Then what is it you fear? Speak it.
She calmly demanded. It reminded me of being in the presence of my father as a child, horrifyingly powerful. The difference, my father was explosive with his power, using it whenever he had the chance on me, whether to train or punish. I don't think my father honestly knew the difference. Salem, though, was a whole different animal entirely. It was as if the power was completely harmonious, and yet chaotically so. She didn't need to show her power. She just was.
Ah, I see. You're afraid of what you feel. It's crushing you.
I looked away and nodded.
Do you feel the need to strike me down? Try and slay the one who created monsters of destruction?
My head snapped back to look at her, my eyes wide.
You would end all suffering.
I could see Cinder staring at me, waiting to see what my reaction would be. I tried my best to show any sort of resolve and stood firm, clenching practically my entire being to try and stop from shaking. No, Your Grace, I said, my voice only slightly shaky.
And why is that?
She said, moving away from me, though just a little, her eyes still peering into my soul, her face more passive, not giving any sort of emotion away. Because I have sided with your faction, and to try and kill you would be abandoning any hope of survival.
But why survive? You are a traitor as far as anyone can tell. How do you know that I won't just assume you won't betray me whenever you feel cornered? You are not nearly as skilled as you would wish that you could avoid potential hardships. And who knows, another cell may await you.
The question hit me hard. Her argument was sound. I don't really have any way to paint this perfectly in my favor, so honesty is what I would go with. There is no possible argument that I could lay out that would clearly and cleanly convince anyone that I won't betray you. I want the second chance to avenge those who have been lost to me. I know who ordered their deaths, and Lady Cinder gave me a chance to confront those who did this. Salem smiled again. That seemed to be the answer she was really looking for. She began as she glided across the floor towards the window, looking out towards the wasteland. She turned to look at me again.
We are going to renew this world. I will form it in the image of my desires. Therefore, if anyone tries to hide their true intentions behind a vague concept like survival, it annoys me. Stating your desires, regardless of how selfish or immoral they may sound, will at the very least earn my respect enough to give you a swift death.
I tensed on the last word.
Oh, don't worry.
She said with a silent laugh.
Your desire is not one that demands death of any kind, as long as you keep in mind that those desires of vengeance will only come true through me.
She looked at Cinder.
What are your desires for him?
Cinder looked at me for a second and stared at the Queen.
He will strike down my enemies, give his life for mine. Using my name, he will fill the people of Remnant's hearts with fear and helplessness. He exists to serve me, and by extension you, my master.
She said word for word the vow that was promised between us. Salem moved toward us again. She looked at the both of us.
The gods held a prophecy explaining the changing of the world.
She closed her eyes as if deep in thought.
In order to make sure it comes to pass as intended, all I can tell you is that your decision in pet, I believe is how you put it, was the moment the prophecy became tangible for me. You will take care of Rowan. He may be your sword and shield, but more so is he a precious tool to getting what you want. Treat him as such.
Cinder bowed.
Of course, Master. We will begin combat training at once.
Now leave us. I wish to speak with him alone.
Cinder looked as if she were about to argue, but thought better of it and left. She went and sat in her chair, the crystals glowing slightly, reacting to the Queen's power.
Come and sit.
I sat next to her. The chair was frigid and hard. I looked at the Queen, who had watched every movement. I was a hunter. I knew what she was doing. She was making note of how I move, keeping any vital target within eyesight in case I tried anything. I was far from the apex predator in the room.
This may surprise you, but I have kept tabs on you since you were young.
I kept a blank face as I stared back at her.
Do you not believe me?
She kept staring. A small smirk grew on her face. It was obvious she wanted to show what she had learned.
A boy who was despised by his father from birth. A boy who witnessed his mother be banished because of his birth. A boy who was worth a punching bag to his father. Sure, a boy who felt love in those close to him. But that existence always felt thin, did it not? Never sure when your father would take everything away again. You fought to protect your younger siblings from him, to make sure they didn't receive the same treatment you did, sacrificing over and over again for your team and your siblings. You were recklessly throwing away the chance of becoming a hunter amongst hunters. Who knows how powerful a hunter you could have been if you didn't sacrifice yourself? Then you got lucky, went to Beacon Academy, were teamed with your Tudali friends, including your mate. But then I struck. I destroyed that paradise, leaving you and your team to fight. You couldn't sacrifice yourself for them, as you were pressured, but you all made it out. It was hard to make it out, but you did it. You healed and went to fight more Grim. This was the only thing you were proficient at, wasn't it? Hunting. You could have hunted by yourself and succeeded in almost any scenario. Then you went to Atlas. You wanted to save all of Mantle, an honorable cause to protect the town forgotten by its leader. As strong and powerful as you were, though, you realized you couldn't fight everywhere all at once. That's when you heard of the bombing of Teudal. All of your family killed due to a plan created by your father that leaked out. They all died because of your abuser. No chance of redemption or of explanation. That fool Ironwood deciding to take matters into his own hands quickly and efficiently. Your team were the last of a village of powerful and expert hunters. That's when you all started running, as you were picked off one by one. You were hunted like animals by the very people you swore to protect. But then you still fought, didn't you? Striking down the enemies before you, determined to live, not allowing yourself to mourn or think about your life up to that point. It was always dedicated to the hunt. Even now, you are trying to ignore that pain, trying your best to ignore all that anger that is swelling inside you.
She put a hand on my face, her touch cold as ice as I looked at her.
I'm not a monster. I am just someone willing to do anything to reach my goals. Rowan, you are just like that as well, aren't you? You always fight so hard. You never thought of saying the words, "I give up," until you couldn't move. So dedicated to the hunt you were. Now I want a few things for you. You are Cinder's hunter. Whoever Cinder needs or wants killed, you will do so. You are Cinder's protector to prevent pain and suffering to befall her. You are a harbinger of what Cinder and I will bring upon our enemies. Do you accept knowing that you are forsaking everything you were?
I was quiet for a moment. Only on the condition that I kill a James Ironwood.
You will have your desired target. But Rowan, always remember, be careful what you wish for. You may face things you do not want to face.
She stood.
Now you are dismissed.
I bowed and stood.
Oh, Rowan.
I stopped immediately, not turning to look at the queen.
No matter what, protect Cinder. She is your owner and your master. No matter how cruel she is to you or anyone, that is the reason you exist.
Again, hearing the vow I swore repeated to me, the vow becoming more and more real and binding every time it is spoken. I bowed once more. Yes, Your Grace. I will personally execute anyone who wishes harm to my Lady Cinder. Salem smiled once more and gestured me to leave, as I was led to my cell to think about the meeting.